that one person had. What do you think? There's not one resident, I don't think. Is there? No. Oh, yeah. There's no residential. Yeah. Oh, Jesus. John, give a speech.
Okay. Is it okay, Sandy? All right. On behalf of the Southington Board of Finance, I'd like to welcome everyone to this public hearing on the 2022-2023 budget. Today is Monday, March 7th, 2022. In the audience, we have many of our elected officials I would like to recognize, only so the public could be aware of who they are. And if you're from the Town Council, Board of Ed, Planning and Zoning, or you are the Town Clerk, please stand up so that everyone just can see who you are. And we thank you for being here with us. And just a reminder to everyone, our elected officials, other than the Town Clerk, are all volunteers, and they're citizen volunteers. So you're your neighbors and elected. I want to explain the process used to develop the budget and levy taxes. While we are one town, our budget is essentially developed in two parts. There's a Board of Education budget and a general government budget. At a high level, the elected Board of Education presents the educational programming or operations budget to the Board of Finance. At the same time, the town manager presents the general government budget. Included in the budget are revenue items, predominantly state grants, local service fees, and then expense items. The expenses are much greater than the grant and fee revenue. So once the budget's approved, taxes will be levied to make up the difference. The town maintains a grand list, which includes all residential and commercial property, vehicles, and business property. These assets are assigned a value based upon their market value. The amount of money needed to balance our budget is levied to the owners of the property based on the value of the property they own. In the private sector, which is much like a family setting, your income and your assets determine what your expenses can be. In the public government sector, the spending is determined first, and the income required to meet that spending is determined second, and then levied on the taxpayers. And we always note that when you're spending someone else's money on other people, it requires careful oversight. Without careful oversight, it is easy to both overspend and overtax. The Board of Finance, your elected citizen volunteer board, exists to carefully review the budget and the financial health of the town in conjunction with the needs and desires of the town residents and businesses while considering the health of the state and the overall economy and its impact on the citizens. In a careful oversight process, the Board of Finance will recommend a budget to the Town Council. Once the Town Council approves the budget, the Board of Finance will then set the mill rate. The complexities or risk factors that we face as we recommend this budget are the COVID-19 pandemic and any uncertainty that surrounds it, uncertainty and unpredictability at the state of Connecticut. We need to consider the impact of the new state tax and any new state tax and grant adjustments on our local taxpayers. Our general government, where we need to maintain our infrastructure and face the reality that as we grow as a community, there is more demand placed on town services that needs to be addressed. As we introduce the 2022-2023 budget, please keep in mind a few points. We remain a healthy community in what continues to be a financially troubled state. While that's the best position to be in, it also makes us a target for reduced state grants and state cost pushdowns as the larger municipalities face greater uncertainty in their budgets and they require more assistance from the state. The total budget request that we're looking at is $162.8 million, which is $6 million higher than the current budget of $156.9. Board of Education is seeking an increase of $4 million, or roughly 4%, and general government is seeking an increase of $2 million, or roughly 3.4%. Grand list growth of $150 million, or 3.4% increase, will provide us $4.4 million of new tax revenue at the current mill rate. This grand list growth reduces the tax increase that would have otherwise been required to cover the new spending. But of the 150 million grand list growth, 69% came from motor vehicles, with 22 coming from real estate and 9% from personal property, motor vehicles. The number of vehicles increased 1.6%, and used vehicles significantly appreciated in value. So 3 million of the 4.4 million of the grand list growth is going to come from the increase in the value of existing vehicles and not necessarily building construction as we typically see when we talk about grand list growth. So most often when we talk about grand list growth, we say, oh, the grand list grew, houses were built, shopping plazas, industrial sites, things were developed, things that didn't exist last year are going to be taxed, and that money is newfound tax revenue. This year, watch out, it's different. Of the 4.4 million, 3 million is coming from the existing vehicles. Typically every year, a used car depreciates in value. They always say when you drive it off the lot, it goes down in value. But remember that, you put more miles on it every year, it goes down, 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 down. Usually it depreciates, and every year your taxes go down, 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 until the car is worthless and you buy a new one. I'm going off script a little. But remember this year that most people will see an increase, especially in pickup trucks and SUVs. You'll see an increase in your tax, and you'll say, what happened? I'm paying more this year than last year. Keep that in mind. Included in our budget is the use of excess fund balance, or the rainy day fund, for capital projects of $1.8 million. That's the same amount as last year, essentially. The excess rainy day fund comes from spending that was withheld from prior years, and this amount is the same. So that's the surplus generated from the surplus the town drives every year, and from good fiscal management, because we do not have a use it or lose it mentality. We eradicated that many years ago, so people only spend what they need. They return to surplus by not spending it, and we get it, and then we could reapply it in the following year mostly towards capital. The combined impact on the mill rate is 0.13 mils, 0.13 mils, or 600,000, or 0.045%. Very minuscule. It's basically a flat mill rate. The impact on the taxpayer of this budget, as submitted, is a home with a $200,000 assessed value. $200,000 value will be assessed at $140,000, and their property tax will increase $18. So again, an essentially flat mill rate. The Board of Education budget only includes educational programming and not the buildings or teacher retirement. The buildings fall on the general government side of the budget, and teacher retirement is currently funded by the state. I mention it because there was talk a couple of years ago, and it pops up every now and then, of maybe having the town contribute to teacher retirement, which is currently an obligation of the state. The town serves in a capacity like a landlord with the school buildings, but since we're one community, no rent is exchanged. And as you may know, Southington has completely renovated many of its schools, and we continue to carry a significant debt burden for school renovations. But schools are very important to Southington and the health of any healthy community. Currently, the Board of Finance is in the process of reviewing the budget to understand the revenue estimates, the spending needs, as expressed by the town manager and the Board of Ed. The Board of Finance is collaborating with the taxpayers to determine their priorities and their thoughts regarding the budget. Every member of the Board of Finance is committed to collaborating with all stakeholders, assessing the economy, asking questions, seeking input, serving as a voice of reason, and ultimately making a fiscally responsible recommendation to the Town Council. You are here tonight to provide valuable input to us as we work towards finalizing our recommendations. We are committed to being a government that respects, works for, and is accountable to its citizens. Taxpayers can participate in the process by reviewing the budget. It's available online, southington.org. Just type 2022 budget. Watch the meetings or workshops in person, or stream them over the streaming capabilities that are available, again, through southington.org, and by collaborating with us as we move towards a final recommendation. All citizens should remember that we strive to do what's in the best interest of the entire town, both in the short term and the long term. As we work towards a budget, we must remain mindful Southington is made up of over 43,000 people and many diverse businesses, each with different needs, different expectations, different financial situations, in different stages of life, impacted differently from the economy, possessing different views on the role of government, and holding different opinions on the scope of education that should be provided to our youth. Our recommendations must take into account the economic diversity of our people, and we must also take into account risks facing our community, such as inflation, COVID-19, uncertainty in our budgeted grant revenue, and the general economy. On an ongoing basis, this board asks a lot of questions in public and in private, collaborates with many people, strives for responsible spending, seeks to eliminate waste, drive transparency, encourages management to set a vision and to prioritize, and ultimately seek the most cost-effective manner which to finance government operations. This is what we, the Board of Finance, commit to do. Now we'll hear from any other Board of Finance member wishing to speak.
Well spoken.
Okay, I'll now call upon our town manager, Mr. Mark Schota, to present his remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, let me say you gave me a very great outline, took most of my stuff, so I'll try not to go too late here. First, the 2022-23 increase is $1,634,206. That is on the operational side of the government budget, which is a 3% increase. The chair included things on the unassigned fund balance, which I'll talk to in a second. That's the operational. 70% of the operational increase really has to do with three separate areas, and we talk about each one. The first one is the Southington Police Department. I'm recommending that we hire 2 new officers. It also includes 2 years of raise. Now, the 2 officers. First of all, about a year ago, the chief, myself, and members of the council discussed, and the police commission discussed possibly doing a task force. As you know, at the time, we were having issues with stolen vehicles, catalytic converters, which is still happening today. But the task force has been a great success. In fact, it's being used as almost a model for other towns. So that being said, by taking the 2 officers off patrol, which was certainly something that we all suggested we do, I did explain to the police department that if it became a success, we'd keep the task force to move from different areas as problems continue throughout the town. That being said, my goal is to put those 2 officers back on patrol. And that's what I'm asking for the 2 police officers on that. The second item is the Southington Fire Department. I'm asking for an additional $309,632. That is for 3 firefighters. As you know, it's offset by a SAFER grant, which is on the revenue side, but that's something that we're going to carry on, obviously pass it through as a SAFER grant. The reason why myself, the chief, the Board of Fire Commissioners think that's vital is the fact it gives us the ability to operate a 3rd station in the south end of town. So Monday through Friday, we're going to have a 3rd station open sometime in June after the 3 firefighters, they're coming out of the academy, I think, in June, so we'll have it going in June. That being said, if you look and see the coverage of the town, the south end of town is some area that need more coverage in, so I'm very much supportive of that. The other thing is payroll taxes and MERS. That's something that always goes up. So when you have employees, you have new employees, that's going up $432,576. As you know, MERS is an important aspect for our employees. That's their retirement. So what happens is every February or March, and sometimes in January, Amelia and I get a letter from the MERS board, the state board, saying, it's not asking us, it's saying, this is what we need to do this year. So that goes up. So in this particular case, that was another aspect of it. So if you take all those together, those equal 70% of the total increase. The other part of the budget, which is $495,000 and 30%, is spread out over all the other areas, including that service. That being said, that's the operational budget. I believe it's a budget that we can move forward with. It gives us what we need. As you know, for the last 4 or 5 years, we're looking at our staff. A couple of years ago, we talked about police officers and firemen. That was 4 years ago. Last year, we added 2 members of the Public Works Division. So this is something that we kind of took our eye off the ball with our staff before. So in the last 4 or 5 years, we've been adding staff as necessary. So I'm hoping that you support that part. Now the capital budget. Capital budget, as you know, is really how we get things done in Southington when it comes to capital items. We were blessed, I guess, this year with $13 million spread out between last June and this June. What we decided to do, and I think between collaboration between this board, the town council, as well as my office, it was important that we said to ourselves, let's use the $13 million wisely. Let's put us in a position where in the future, maybe we won't have to do bonding when we thought we have to do bonding, and therefore not necessarily reduce our debt service, but get it a little bit more under control. So that's what we chose to do. We used all of it for one-time capital expenditures. These aren't anything that's going to continue in the future. So with that, we used $5,712,400 in this fiscal year for the ARPA money. As for cash, the cash capital, as you know, that's the money that's from the taxpayers in this budget that I'm proposing, and that's $500,000, which is similar to what we did last year. Budget reallocation money, that's the money where we take, Amelia and myself and all the department heads sit down in April and we figure out from the current budget, the budget we're in right now, not next year's budget, we see if there's any kind of money we could use and allocate that toward one-time capital expenditures for the next tax year, next budget year, and therefore save the taxpayers money. That's what we do. Mr. Chairman, you also discussed the unassigned fund balance. My recommendation is that we use $1,795,710, which is very similar to last year. It's very wise because, I know we've talked about this many times, we have a very healthy unassigned fund balance, which is a blessing and a curse. The blessing means that we have some flexibility to use it for one-time capital expenses. The curse is that when funding is coming out of Hartford, sometimes they look at that, and that could be an issue for us. So in this particular case, on behalf of the superintendent and myself, I think that we gave you a very responsible budget. And I understand that we had a very large grandless increase, but also this is probably the initial lowest mill rate increase that I've seen on this year. I'm happy to answer any questions. Amelia's here to answer any questions, and all the department heads are here for any help with any questions.
Thank you.
Sure.
Now we'll call upon Mrs. Colleen Clark, the Board of Education Chair, to speak on behalf of the Board of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Lear, members of the Board of Finance. It is my pleasure to be here to present our budget, which is, as you know, so I can get the correct number for this year, $104,618,146, which, as you indicated earlier, Mr. Leary, was an increase of 4%. But unlike any other budget that we've had in years past, this budget does not include any request for any new personnel, any major projects, any equipment, or any special projects. And I want everyone in the public to know that this is the first time since I've been on the board, nothing has been included with this increase. Okay? With that being said, to get into further details, I would like to introduce the head of our administrative leadership team, Mr. Stephen Medancy, our superintendent. Mr. Medancy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Clark, members of the Board of Finance, thank you. Similar to what Mr. Koda alluded to, our budget is comprised, this year, 63% of it is salaries, 18% of the budget is benefits. Purchase services category comprises approximately 14%, and 27% of our overall budget is related to special education costs. One of the areas we're going to have to watch for is the purchase services area in terms of the rising in prices right now that has to do with either labor shortage or supply chain issues. We're already starting to see some of our bids come in higher than originally budgeted for and anticipated, so we're going to have to consider that in our reallocation meetings in May. You've asked very thoughtful questions. I hope the information I provided was of value to you, but I look forward to further conversation. Anybody from your board or town council is welcome to call me with any questions you have, or if you wanted to make an appointment and have a conversation with me, I'd welcome that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now the purpose of this public hearing is to hear from the public. So all Southington taxpayers are invited to address the Board of Finance. To allow fairness, every person will be given 3 minutes to address the board, and each speaker is asked just to speak from the podium. Do we have anyone from the public who'd like to speak to us and address this budget tonight? Well, that may be a first. Okay. Well, seeing no one here, just a reminder that you can reach out to anybody here or everybody here. There's a group email address that hits us all. There's individual contact information. and I know that everybody on this board is open and willing to communicate with anybody in the community regarding the budget and to get those thoughts. We will have workshops. Now, the workshops are available. I mean, everything we do, we have to do in public under FOIA. We can't go off into a back room and concoct a budget. We have to do it in public. The public's work is done in public. So, March 8th, we will have a workshop, which is tomorrow, 6:30 at the Town Hall. March 9th, which is Wednesday, 6:30 at the Town Hall. Then March 23rd and March 24th, if we need it. We put in a fourth one and notice it to everyone. If we get our work done before then, we'll cancel it. But certainly March 8th, March 9th, March 23rd, and it is at March 23rd that the Board of Education will come into the room, and we have, in the last few years, we've opened up dialogue with the Board of Ed.
They're coming tonight,
Oh,
aren't they?
coming March, oh,
Ninth.
did it change?
Yeah.
Oh, March 9th, I'm sorry. I have either an older copy or something. March 9th, so Wednesday night, the Board of Ed is going to come in a room. And a few years ago, or when we first started the process, so everybody knows who's here, it was a observation-only type process. And I could remember people in the public who were there writing on note cards and then holding them up if they wanted to get our attention. And we said that's kind of silly, but it had to be that way so it wouldn't be a free-for-all. But then we decided to let the town manager and finance director come in and dialogue with us at our direction. And we also let the Board of Education and superintendent come in and dialogue with us, again, when we needed to. And that has worked out well for the last several years. We control it so it doesn't go on forever, but if we have a question, they're right there to answer it, and usually they come out in force. The town manager and finance director are always with us, and a good chunk of the Board of Education, a majority of the Board of Education is usually there, and our questions get answered if there are any left to that day. And it's been helpful. So that's how our process goes. We cannot vote anything in a workshop. So sometimes we come out, we call it taking the temperature. We ask everyone, is that something you could support? Yes or no? What do you think? But we never know. We've seen cases where things change. But the real vote happens when we come back together as a formal Board of Finance and we vote to make the recommendation to Town Council. That's how the process goes. Then Town Council will hold a public hearing. They'll do similar activities, and then they will vote on a budget. They will tell us what that is. And the one thing we can do that nobody else can do, our special power, we could set the mill rate. That's our one special, unique thing that's unique only to us. So we'll do that, and then the budget process concludes. So thank you for being here, and it's an early night.
Joe, as your wife, a couple people.
Has anybody got any letters from the constituency?
As yours?